What is going on, everybody? I just had a new idea for a series in the challenge tutorials, and we're going to call it the Punisher. It's all about punishing your opponent for making an error or a wrong move in the opening. We're going to start off with something very simple. E4, E5, and knight F3 sets it up, and black is going to make the horrible mistake of defending their E pawn with their F pawn. We'll give you 3 seconds to pause the video. Take your time, try to figure out what you can do to execute on this mistake. 1, 2, and 3. The move to punish black is capturing the free pawn on E5. If they want to make another mistake and compound the problem, they can grab your knight, and then you can punish them further with bringing the queen out to H5 with check. This is going to go one of two ways. If they try blocking the check, you can pick up a second pawn. You still have all 8. They're down to 6. And it doesn't matter if they block the check or run from the check. You can scoop up the rook in the corner, and you're going to be up a significant amount of material, and black has lost their castling rights. Now, if they don't block the initial check and they decide to run, they have one move. And it's just as bad, if not worse. You're going to capture the pawn, just like when black chose to block instead, and the black king has to scooch over to the F7 square, only one available. From here, you want to bring your light squared bishop out to C4 with check, and black's options are just going to shrink more and more. Checkmate is a very good possibility if black does not play very precisely, but you will have a good game from here on out, and you will retrieve your material if you play logically. This next position we get to punish black is the Petrov defense, also known as the Russian game. E4, E5, knight F3, knight F6, knight captures E5, and if black copycats capturing E4, queen comes to E2 attacking the knight, and if they make the horrible mistake of bringing the knight back to the F6 square, this is where we can throw down the Punisher. Give you 3 seconds to pause the video. 1, 2, and 3. The move we're looking for is knight to C6 with a discovery check on the black king with your queen. If you notice, the knight is now attacking the black queen, and the only square that the queen can move to is still under fire by the knight. They're in check. They have to block it since they can't run. Doesn't matter if they block it with the bishop, you can capture the queen, or if they block it with the queen itself, you can capture the queen. You're going to have an excellent game from here. This next position we get to punish is the Caro-Kann defense. E4, C6, D4, D5, knight C3, and this is the exchange variation. D takes E4, knight takes E4, and black is going to play the Karpov variation, which is a unique defense where the knight comes to D7. We're going to load up the shotgun with queen to E2, just like the last problem. And if black makes a mistake, such as knight to F6, we can punish it. We'll give you 3 seconds to pause the video so you can analyze the position as long as you need. 1, 2, and 3. Since the pawn in front of the black king on E7 is pinned, if we move the knight, knight to D6 is checkmate. This one's for black in the Caro-Kann. So after E4, C6, the hillbilly attack is bishop to C4. We're going to go ahead and push our pawn to D5, hitting the bishop, and the good players back it out to B3. Make sure to check in the description. I have my own named variation. I will include a link to a separate tutorial in the description below for that variation. The Sum-Dum Trucker defense is pushing A5, and white's going to continue with a trade-off on D5. And if they make a mistake, like developing the knight to F3, we can punish them. Give you 3 seconds to pause the video. 1, 2, and 3. Pushing the A pawn again to A4 traps the light squared bishop, and the computer analysis will put this as about 6 in black's favor. When you run into the Sicilian defense, which is C5 against E4, there's a variation called the Mangarini variation. What you can do is if black backs up their C5 pawn with the D pawn, you push the standard move to continue the Mangarini, which is B4. And if they want to double up and make a triangle pawn formation with b6, you can try punishing them. Go ahead and push e5, and if they take it, you can punish them. That was not a free pawn. We'll give you 3 seconds to pause the video. 1, 2, and 3. The move is queen to f3. It's attacking the rook in the corner, and there's nothing they can do to protect that rook safely. They are able to either give up the bishop, and then they'll move the knight, or they can guard with the knight, and then stop the check with the bishop, and the rook and queen will be connected now, so the loss won't be quite as much, but regardless, they're down a minor piece. If black defends e4 with the Scandinavian defense, I'm going to go ahead and capture the pawn, and they'll recapture with the queen. Next move order isn't too important. I personally like to bring out the pawn before kicking the queen, because once you play e4, they can go ahead and push out the knight to c6. You can protect the pawn now instead of attacking the queen with knight f3. And if they try pinning the knight to the queen, you can unpin it with your bishop. And here is where the magic happens. They go ahead and capture, you recapture, and now you're attacking the queen, and they have 2 attackers on the pawn. You only have 1 defender, which is the queen. So logically, they can go ahead and capture the pawn with the queen. But they just made a big mistake. Give you 3 seconds to pause the video. 1, 2, and 3. The move is bishop capture knight with check. More or less, they have to either sidestep with the king, or they can back up the queen and lose it to the bishop. And if they do sidestep, their queen no longer has that knight protecting it. So, if you build it, they will come. In the Scotch game, after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and d4, if e takes d4, you don't have to recapture right away with the knight. Instead, you can play a gambit, and after the bishop comes to c4, if black makes the move bishop to c5 themselves, you can push c3. And if the pawn comes and captures the c3, that is a mistake, and we can punish black. I'll give you 3 seconds to pause the video. 1, 2, and 3. The move is bishop capture f7, check. And if the king recaptures, we can bring our queen up now to d5 and recheck the king. And no matter where they go with the king, usually it's typical to tuck away to e8. We can pick up the dark squared bishop. But it is best to actually throw in one more quick check on h5. And that is because they only have 2 options to go to, or they can block it with a g-pawn. But if they move the king, when you capture the bishop now, that comes with another check. In the king's gambit declined after e4, e5, f4, you can play the Falk-Beer counter gambit by pushing d5. E will capture d5, and we want to ignore that and push c6. White, if they bring the queen out to e2, pinning the e5 pawn, ignore it again and just capture the d5 pawn. If they capture the pawn with check, we want to lure them into getting the g7 pawn. Block it with the bishop, and if they grab the g7 pawn, we can punish them. Give you 3 seconds to pause the video. 1, 2, and 3. The move is bishop to f6. It attacks the queen, and out of the 6 squares that it can go to that are not occupied, only one of them is not under attack. But that doesn't work either, because the dark squared bishop can now go to h4, and that queen is a goner. In the queen's gambit declined, which is d4, d5, c4, if black chooses to just have a French style setup with the pawns and pushes e6, we're going to go ahead and develop our knight to f3. And if they bring the bishop to d6, Want to go ahead and close up our pawn structure with e3. And if black plays the move knight to e7, we can go ahead and punish them. Give you 3 seconds to pause the video. 1, 2, and 3. Pushing the pawn to c5 traps the dark squared bishop. Last but not least, we're going to finish up on the Philidor defense. e4, e5, knight f3, and black plays d6, closing the pawn structure early. We're going to play a Scotch type pawn push with d4, and if black develops the first knight to d7, we want to go ahead and develop our bishop to c4, and if black develops the other knight to f6, alarm bells should be going off, and we want to go ahead and capture the e5 pawn. And if black takes the free pawn on e4, we can punish them. I'll give you 3 seconds to pause the video. 1, 2, and 3. Queen to d5 not only threatens checkmate on f7, but attacks the knight, which is not protected, on e4. They cannot parry both at the same time. Black's best attempt at minimizing damage is just bringing the queen to e7. We can go ahead and pick up the knight with our queen, and there's nothing that they can do. They're going to be about 4 points down on the analysis. That wasn't too bad, was it? I thought it was relatively easy. Remember, in the description, I'm going to put a link to the opening variation, which I named and the chess community has taken with open arms. And that's about it. I appreciate every last one of you. Welcome the new people. Feel free to drop a comment, and I will see you shortly on the next video. Adios, mijo.